The life-saving traditions of the United States Coast Guard has its origins in the U.S. Life-Saving Service. Established in 1878, the Life-Saving Service was created to respond to the rising demand for aid to shipwrecked sailors. Previously, during the 18th and 19th centuries, the government and groups such as the Massachusetts Humane Society had organized funds and volunteers to man stations along the sparsely populated eastern seaboard. However, the stations lacked funding, equipment, volunteers, and training. Meanwhile, a series of storms and catastrophic shipwrecks throughout the 19th century highlighted the need for a better system. In 1871, the chief of the Treasury Department Revenue Marine Division, Sumner Kimball, appropriated $200,000 to employ crews, build new stations, and establish regulations with standards of performance for crew members. By 1874, stations were added along the coast of Maine, Cape Cod, North Carolina, and Texas. The next year, more stations were added to serve the Great Lakes and Florida. In 1878, the network of life-saving stations were formally organized as a separate agency of the United States Department of the Treasury, called the Life-Saving Service. The service had three classes of station: life-saving, lifeboat, and houses of refuge. Life-saving stations were built in isolated areas on the Atlantic coast, Great Lakes, and Pacific coast. Lifeboat stations were established on the Great Lakes and Pacific coast, near ports and cities. And houses of refuge, which were on the coast of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. The service had two means of rescuing people who were stranded near shore. In smooth seas, crews of 6 would launch boats that were both self-bailing and self-righting. In rough waters, they shot a line through a Lyle gun and ferried people from the wreck using a life-saving car or breeches buoy. On January 28, 1915, President Woodrow Wilson signed the Act to create the Coast Guard, merging the Life-Saving Service with the Revenue Cutter Service to create the United States Coast Guard. By the time the act was signed, there was a network of more than 270 stations covering the Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean, and Gulf of Mexico coasts, as well as the Great Lakes. Want to know more? Check out the Soundings June 2017 issue, or go to soundingsonline.com to find answers for all your boating questions.